Hello there and welcome back to the studio. Today, for the past few days, we have been using the classical approach for portrait paintings using regular oil paint. So in today's episode, we're going to start a still life painting, a classical still life painting using water mixable oil paint. And we have our tools right over here, just a regular old glass palette. This is the medium that I'll be using. Let's see if the camera can focus. Aqua Duo linseed oil. I'm going to be using just the Winsor & Newton brand. So just titanium white and burnt umber, and of course we have the water to clean out the brushes. And if you would like to know exactly what materials I'm using and or purchase the same type of materials, I have links to the Amazon affiliate links to the exact materials that I'm using in the description box down below. Just know that if you do decide to purchase the same type of materials I'm using, Amazon will pay me a small amount, so thank you in advance for that. Now what you see here is the still life object. So we have our 9 by 12 inch cotton canvas panel and our still life to the corner over there. It's a simple I guess porcelain glass looking thing with a flower and then the red down here. Very classical looking setup for a very classical painting. Now the way that this is going to differ from the traditional oil paints is that with the traditional oil paints, what I would do is thin out the oil paint with my odorless mineral spirits. You can create a little wash there and use a drawing brush. I'm not going to do that so much today, so I'm not going to really thin out the paint or anything like that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to use an HB graphite pencil and a kneaded eraser, and we're going to do a linear drawing before applying the underpainting values. And now the camera is as close as I can possibly get it to front and center, yet still at an angle to allow me to start drawing. So I'm just going to be using a simple block in. So I'm thinking that the bottom of this object is going to fit somewhere around here, and the top is going to fit somewhere around here. So I am going to make the still life object a little bit lower. I have to think about the bottom plane of the I guess normally I would say the model stand, this thing here. So I'm going to think about the bottom plane for that. Alright, so I'm looking at the angle for that. Don't worry, I'm not going to show you the entire process in terms of the still life drawing, just because that would be awfully tedious. Right now I'm just going to show you how I set up the composition, and then we're going to fast forward to the point where we start to actually create the underpainting. This right here is my center line, and I know that it may be kind of difficult, if not impossible, to see my lines just because this is graphite. So I'm going to try to press a little bit darker. So with graphite, typically you want to start off a little bit lighter, but since I'm trying to film a video here, I'm going to have to be very cautious with how not making my lines too light. I think you can see that, right? The line here, here, here. So we're just going to set up the symmetry of the still life, and then I'm going to go in and just fill out the outside shape basically. So compositionally, I want this still life element, again, like I said, to be a little bit lower. I don't want to crop the corner of this thing, right? The table. I don't want to crop it right here. So around here, give or take, maybe, I don't know, here and here, will be about fine. This is going to be the top of the still life element, the bottom, the center line, and this is going to be a simple shape for the flowers that we have there. The next thing to think about before cutting to the underpainting section is this diagonal here. Now keep in mind that the still life is at a different angle in perspective with respect to you. I don't really think I'm going to show a photo reference of the picture just because it wouldn't be fair. I am working from life, so things will look very, very different in terms of perspective and color. So I think it should be enough to be able to see the still life element right there, right? Okay, so now this is the cast shadow. I can directly relate these angles, though, it's going to look a little different from your vantage point. So, okay, that's pretty much all of the main elements in this composition. It's important to plot out all of the elements in the composition rather early, so that when you continue to add on more elements to the painting, the values, you're motivated to continue working on the painting. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to develop the linear drawing. And I've decided to show you some more of the drawing aspects, just in case you would like to know more about still life drawing. Though I'm not going to show everything, okay? So I'm thinking about the symmetry right now, okay? So the center line, right? So if this is the center point, I'm going to relate this point to this point, this point to this point, right there, even though that's kind of in an awkward position. So just want to make sure that, okay, see, I want to make sure that these points match up so that we have a sense of symmetry. So it looks like the furthest corner back needs to fit around here. Now I do realize that there might be a little bit more width to that still life object, just perceptually. So I'm going to actually decide to push the bottom plane a little further. Now, since it's a still life, I'm not really that concerned about the, the exact likeness. It's not like in a portrait, where someone's going to look at it and say, well, the nose doesn't look exactly like, the model or something like that. It's not as important, but I do want to stay as true to nature as I possibly can. So another thing about this linear block-in, other than using straight lines and angles, as you see me doing here, it's important not to get caught up in trying to get the exact shape. Though I want to make these shapes as accurate as possible. Notice how I'm constantly going back and forth, between one point and then another point. I'm also deciding to, I decided when I set up that still life that I'm going to center it, just because, I don't know, classically I think it just looks better to, put it center rather than, like a 3/4. If it were 3/4, it would be a little strange, I think, in terms of the composition. I'm going to relate this side to this side, constantly relating points, okay, to try to get the symmetry of this still life object. And definitely working from the outside in. I'm not terribly worried about any of those details. I'm not even that concerned about the shadows just yet, just because this is a very linear approach. And like I said, I don't want to dwell on trying to make it perfect. It's not going to be like a coloring book. So there, there's nothing wrong with the coloring book. It's just that it's not my cup of tea. It's not my aesthetic to, have the perfect finished outline and just fill in. It's just not what I'm about, All right, so now I'm going to continue to block in the flowers. I'm just looking for the abstract shape, the whatchamacallit, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the negative shape, like this negative shape here. Then I'm going to look for this negative shape up here very quickly. And so the flower, I'm not going to draw every little petal of the flower with the pencil, just because I really don't think that I'm going to need to do that. Rather, I'm thinking of the shape of the flower, the shape of the flower in relation to this object, and the relative position of the flower. So I'm using a little bit of a vertical line right now, and I think that I could push the flower a little further to the left. So I'm going to use my kneaded eraser. Though the graphite doesn't erase that well, even though this is an HB. So just know that if you're going to use the same type of technique, don't get caught up with trying to get the perfect outline. Just don't do it. Don't do that to yourself, okay? You will be able to continue to make the drawing much more accurate when you get into the underpainting, okay? And this serves the same purpose as the burnt umber sketch. Remember, I think it was 2 days ago, we started a new larger portrait. Remember that? And you saw me like put in a very careful outline for the fingers and things like that, the phalanges. It's the same kind of thing, okay? It's the same principle. It's just a different material. And I'm choosing to use graphite right now instead of charcoal just because I felt like it. You know, sometimes I want to work with charcoal. You've seen me start off with charcoal before, or you may have seen me start off with charcoal before and then put in the underpainting. I could have done that, but I just didn't feel like it. And again, I'm not going to draw every leaf, but I do want to have a little control. So there's a leaf over here, over here, over here. There's going to be a leaf, I don't know, somewhere over here. 1, 2, 3, 4. I tend to like to work with odd numbers. Notice there are three flowers, one here, here, and here. So I tend to favor odd numbers in terms of composition. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that might be good. Just leave it at 5 leaves there. I did say I wouldn't show you all of the linear drawing, but we're almost close to being done with the linear drawing, so you know, might as well. If you want to hang out with me, let's hang out and draw a still life together, why not? Now we're going to block in the light and shadow shapes. So here's one very predominant cast shadow over here. You know, I'm thinking of, again, that abstract shape. And then I want to think about how this shadow follows the form. So it goes up here and then starts to turn, because all of this is, again, a plane that's turning away. There we go. Now that's turning down. So even a cast shadow over here. Let's just fill that in. Very lightly, though. I don't want to do too much for that, since we are going to go over it with paint really soon. Cast shadow over here. I really want to focus on getting the exact shape, or at least get as close to the exact shape as I possibly can. And now what do we do? We're going to look at this shadow and this shadow. And I don't really want to fill this shadow in, rather I'm just looking at, here's another little compositional thing, okay? So we have this corner of the back side of the still life object. I don't want this corner to meet up perfectly with this. I don't want this to meet with that. Again, that's going to be another compositional thing. Like, I don't want this to meet up with this. Just compositionally, compositionally. In terms of composition, it just bothers me. I don't know if it bothers you. If this plane would be perfectly meeting that plane, I don't know. Just compositionally, it's disturbing, and I don't want it to be disturbing. Now the cast shadow goes up here, follows the shape of the drapery a little bit. This goes down, and that should be about it. Alright, so now you're at an angle looking down at the palette. Hopefully it's not too awkward of an angle. I have the camera on the tripod just so I don't lose the position that we have up there with the still life object. So here's what I'm going to do to save myself quite a bit of time. Whoops, sorry. Yep, I'm going to bump into the camera to save time, right? Just kidding. So I'm going to mix up the color value web with the palette knife, and I'm also going to pour the medium that I'm going to use. This is Aqua Oil, Linseed, Aqua Duo medium. And the medium is just to increase the fluidity of the paint without having to use too much water. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to mix up however many values I can. So for instance, that's 1. And I'm doing this with the palette knife just so I can take directly from each little spot. So that's 1. And maybe I don't need to show this entire process, so maybe we'll do one more. One more, okay, so. And I'm just going to keep moving up the value scale until I have all of these values mapped out. And then I'm just going to assign a brush for a specific value, and then we're going to continue to proceed with the underpainting in this way. Alright, that should be about good for this value. Almost looks like chocolate. Now we're going to do this for the rest of the values. And there we have it. We have 7 values pre-mixed, and I'll be taking directly from these values to continue with the underpainting. Again, I'll just use the water that's in the corner over here. There you go. So I'm going to use the water to clean out the brushes once in a while, and then right there. So I put the medium in this little, I guess this lid right here. And so we're going to start by covering the major shapes of light and dark first. So I'm going to go ahead and put this value, and it's pretty much, let's see here, it's the third to the darkest color or value. And again, this is just burnt umber, Winsor Newton water mixable. So like I said, you don't want to, you know, you probably shouldn't try to finish the outline, just because when we get into this stage, we can continue to push the specificity even further. So using the same brush, I'm actually going to do a bunch of different things. So this is going to be a, well, let me just show you. So now we're going to transition to the burnt umber, just the burnt umber itself, with the same brush. See how quickly we will be able to move. And I'm thinning out the paint a little bit with the medium. I will admit it is a slow drying medium, so I don't know if this will be dry by tomorrow. But I just actually finished filming another little trip to one of my favorite painting groups, so be on the lookout for that. But anyway, so now I'm filling in this shape here. Now it's just kind of a combination between those two. We're going to put in this simple dark shape here. And simple is the key word. I'm actually going to move up the value range. And I'm using the same brush, okay? I did say I was going to use a bunch of different brushes, and I will switch to a different brush soon, like right now. So I'm switching to a different brush. And now we're going to start to put in these turning values. These are turning values. So what I'm doing is I'm moving up the value scale, trying to establish the dark light. And remember, the dark light is exactly this. So it's the value right in between light and shadow, and it's the value that determines the curvature of the form the most efficiently. Now moving up the value scale, same brush. So right now I have 2 brushes, just light and dark, and those 2 brushes are using, they're using different values that I'm taking right from the palette. It's almost like a piano. And I'm trying to use the least amount of medium possible. So right now there is no extra medium on the brush. And the reason being is that the fat over lean principle in oil painting, simply put, you want to use less medium in your earlier stages, or the converse, you can say, increase the amount of medium that you use as you increase the number of layers. But see how dimensional this is starting to look, like really, really fast. It hasn't even been, I don't even know, it hasn't even been like 4 minutes or 5 minutes since we've been applying the paint. I don't know. Now we're going to move down on the value scale and put in a plane change. See that? Now we're starting to see a little bit of a plane change, but only slightly now. And just like a piano, I'm able to move around the keys very, very quickly. Now it's just going to be titanium white on its own. Moving down again on the value scale. This is just one value below the titanium white. And again, no medium. And I will admit, these are synthetic brushes. I know. I should probably use bristles, But I think that this is working just fine. If you have bristle brushes, you can use them. But right now, you know, it's not really that much of a problem for me to paint with just synthetics. And I will admit, this is kind of like a synthetic bristle mix. And again, I have links in the description box down below to the brushes that I'm using. Amazon links, in case you want to purchase the same type of brushes. Now, isn't this just like magic? We're working our way up the value scale. How about we make it darker and just a little bit darker over here? There you go. As we start to turn on the value scale. Now we're going to move one value down as I drop my shadow brush and get paint on my pants. So we're now moving down the value scale. And see the volume, just the volume. Isn't that amazing what we can get with just value alone? And once this layer dries, you know, we will commence the other stage of of what I'm now calling Yupari's classical approach, which is the, can you say which stage comes after the underpainting stage? If you can, please comment down below. Okay, so the next stage after this will be the local color stage. So right now we're preparing ourselves for the color stage. And in the local color stage, you know, I won't say too much because that's going to be for the next time we work on this still life, but in the local color stage, we will start to look for, you know, the average color within a given area. And then we'll paint that color in very simply. Then once that dries, we will continue to build more articulate colors. So now that we're moving towards this area here, notice the contour over here. It's actually going to get lighter, very, very much lighter over here. I'm going to actually switch to the titanium white. And with the underpainting, you typically want to work a little bit lighter, and you want to work a little bit softer with your edges, okay? That is because as you continue to add more and more layers, you will continue to, you'll see that it's much easier to sharpen an edge than it is to soften it as you work later. So that's why we want to lean towards the softer values, or sorry, softer edges, such as this one. And now we're going to move down the value range, not very much though. And now we're going to start to put in these little dark shapes for the handle. And since we are working over top of a pencil drawing, I figure we might as well, you know, just continue to work with a more precise application of paint, just because, you know, graphite lends itself to a more precise start, and that's what we're doing. You don't always have to start like this. You know, sometimes we'll start with a much more loose approach and then, you know, build the specificity from there. All really depends on how you're feeling. Now we're going to put in, you know, I should switch brushes. The shadow over here. So it's one step lighter than that one. And now we're going to get a little bit darker because this value is really, really dark. Right over here. So this one's definitely darker than that one. And then we're going to put in the titanium white and then kind of blend all throughout here. Okay, now we are going to use a little bit of the medium because I'm going to want a very thin line. Very careful now. And I don't expect myself to get the symmetry right away. You know, it's kind of something you can build towards. So in a sense, this is kind of a loose And by loose, I mean just like, you know, not worrying about an exact finish just yet. All right, so here, now we're going to put this little shadow. And this shadow value is a little bit lighter. So we're making it a little bit lighter. And then as we move towards here, there's actually going to be a little plane. Like I said, since we used that little graphite drawing, we can be much more precise earlier on. No shame in that. And again, the goal with this, since we are using the classical approach for a still life, is to make this much more realistic than, you know, an alla prima approach. You know, nothing wrong with an alla prima approach, because, you know, I love using alla prima, meaning just painting wet on wet. It's just, this is, I don't know, relaxing. See how we're pushing in this plane there? It's actually going to get much lighter over here. Very bright. All right. Let's see, I'm going to push the value variation over here, making this a little bit darker. But let's see, so I want it to be a little bit darker. That means that I have to push this a little bit lighter, working up the value range. There we go. This is a very relaxing episode, I think. I don't know. What do you think? Too relaxing? Is that even possible? Alright, so we're pushing this value a little bit darker in comparison to these. And it's so much nicer to be working from life. You know, in the future, I want to be able to afford to pay my models to sit for me, you know, working figurative, you know, portrait paintings from life. But, you know, I don't have to pay this model right here. A little bit lighter. There we go. All right. So now that we have this little top area covered, I think that it would be a good idea to start drawing some stuff in for the flower. And I'm going to start with the flower. So I'm going to use the same brush. Now the values are going to be very, very compressed. I'm using a little bit more of the medium, though I'm trying to use the least amount of medium possible. You know, not just because of the fat over lean principle, but also because of that medium, that Aqua Duo linseed oil is a slow dryer, and I really don't want this to take its time for drying. And the thing I like about traditional oil paints, actually what I like the most, is that I'm able to hold a palette. You know, I'm using a glass palette, so you don't really see me holding a palette. One of the things I like the most about traditional oil paints is the fact that I can control, and I know exactly how long it'll take for each layer to dry. So for instance, yesterday's episode was the one that was finishing up the light and dark patterns. I think I titled it Let There Be Light, and some shadows too. So that was yesterday's episode. And I knew that layer, because I painted pretty thick, even though I used the fast drying medium, I knew that layer would be dry to the touch in about 2 days, and it is. This is actually the second day for me. But as you know, I'm going to be continuing to do other paintings, so it's not, you know, going to be the same painting every single day, Monday through Sunday. And I know that's a kind of a sloppy job for that flower there, and I'm not really that worried about trying to get the exact shape. So just like with the linear drawing, you know, I said you don't have to get it completely perfect because you'll be able to continue to build. And the same goes with the underpainting to an extent. You know, the classical approach, I'm going to actually eliminate some glare here. It's a fan brush. The classical approach allows you to break it down step by step. So right now what I'm searching for is just simple patterns of light and dark. Now, this should be lighter. No, it should be a little bit darker actually than this. So I'm not worried about, you know, trying to get the perfect value either. You know, so just laying down a ground for later. And that's all. Okay, so now we're going to block in a value for this. And again, with the flower, I'm not going to be too cautious with the shapes. A little half tone here. And I'm putting in a larger shape than what I'm seeing. So I'm making this flower a little bit larger on purpose because I know once I come back in with the background value, I can carve right into it. Here's the third flower, or at least evidence of the third flower behind there. Okay, so that's enough for that. And now I'm going to use the other brush, a little more of the medium. So now the flowers or the leaves, so this one goes in here. You can see, hopefully, that the paint is a little bit thinner, so that's with the Aqua Duo linseed oil. Maybe I need to make this a little lighter. It's going to be very similar to the background value, so if these start to disappear a little bit, it's not too much of a problem. You know, we'll be able to come back in and make it more exacting later. It's a very relaxed way to work. All right, now that we have the flowers, I'm going to get a larger brush and I'm going to add a little bit of medium to it. And with just the burnt umber, I'm going to start to block in that dark shape. Okay, this goes down here. Now we're going to move up. It's a lighter value. Whoops. Okay. So now, with a larger brush, I get a larger brush. Now we're going to start to cover the large shapes for the background. Let me see, that might be too dark. So let's hold back a little bit. So let's see. I think that's a little better. So let's use this value here. So I'm going to show you which values I'm going to use, but since this and all of this is such a large surface, I'm only going to cover a small portion on camera, and then we'll resume when the entire thing is covered. Okay, so now we have that little platform. All right, now let's relate this value, and you know, I think I'm gonna just use straight up burnt umber and a different brush. And remember, the nice thing about burnt umber is that it doesn't get as dark as ultramarine blue or ivory black. So once we do get into using color, we will have another level that we can go. And like I said, just to show you, this is going to become this is going to be very close to the value, or the values for the leaves. See that? So it's going to be really, really close. But it'll be okay. Now that we have this value and this value, let's go ahead and with the same brush for this shape, I'm actually going to decide to make this bottom plane a little bit lighter, and only a little bit, okay? And I don't really see that, okay? I don't see that here. But aesthetically, I want to push that difference. I want to push the differentiation between this plane and this plane. So we're getting pretty close to the end of today's episode. So now that I have this value, this one, and we have all of the main values here. I'm just going to go ahead and cover the rest. Now that we have the rest of the large shapes covered, I have just a few more things that I want to do, and then we're going to let this dry. So let's go ahead, put in the accent. Remember, an accent is when one form meets another form. So we definitely will have one when this touches this. I'm going to have to hold my hand straight here. Will admit, again, I had coffee like less than an hour ago, or maybe like 2 hours ago. So, yeah. Coffee definitely makes my hand shake a little bit. Anyway, I'm just using the medium to thin out the paint. I'm not too worried, you know, about the symmetry of all this stuff. I'm more focused on the composition and the large patterns of light and dark, because the symmetry, the little tiny symmetry here and there, you know, that's tiny stuff. That's stuff we can get later. A few more little accent marks here. Another one will exist here. This form meets this one. It's going to be a bottom to this little flower, just so it doesn't look like it's floating. And the way I have this flower attached onto there is actually a straw. I think it's like a Slurpee straw that I put the flower in to prop it up here. But anyway, now over here, let's get a more refined shape. And I do like leaving some of the brush strokes, or a lot of the brush strokes, to show through. You know, I refer to that as the awesome factor. The awesome factor is when you can see some of the underpainting showing through in classical paintings. So that's what I defined as the awesome factor. That should be about good. And this is just kind of to prove to you that I was really only taking from those values that I mixed up. See, I didn't really mix anything here at all. I was just taking right from those values. But what I wanted to show you was, you can also see that I didn't use too much water either. I just used a medium to thin out the paint. But what I wanted to show you is how easily this cleans, okay? If you've never used water mixable oil paints, okay, check this out, okay? Are you ready? Are you ready? Okay. Did you see how quickly the water changed color? So that's one of the biggest pros to water mixable oil paints. They clean so easily, like super, super fast. Though I will have to use soap and water to clean off the brushes just to make sure that they are completely clean. That being said, always remember, in a world that can be so negative, and I mean so negative, be the spark that ignites positivity amongst all of us. Because if you put on a smile, if you're cheerful, if you're happy, the people around you are going to be happy. It's a contagious thing, and it's a wonderful thing. That being said, I truly do hope that today's video helps you out. I wish you the best in all of your artwork, and I'll see you tomorrow.